want to start with a prayer. I want to ask Bill if he would lead us in a short prayer as we start.
Father in heaven, we thank you for this day. We thank you for another opportunity we have to come together, study, to worship, sing songs, to praise you, lift up your name this morning. We pray, Lord, that everything we do will be focused upon you, to shut the things of the world out. We ask you, Lord, to be with us as we go through this class. Be with us as students to be aware and listen and take what we learn and use in our own life. Lord, we thank you for many things. Most of all, we thank you for your Son who gave his life for us. In his name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Bill. Excuse me, I've had a gravel throat all week. So I got class and preaching. I hope it holds up. That's all I can say. We're going to study the parables this quarter. I have a book. I don't know if anybody here has ever heard of this book or not, because it's 61 years old. It's called Lessons from the Parables by Neil Lightfoot. Anybody ever heard Neil Lightfoot? Yeah. Well, I used this book before, and I'm going to use part of it in our study of the parables this time. Because he has some good things to say, and he does a good job. Probably a better job than I could do anyway, so why not use some of the stuff that he has. We're going to look first of all at the parables that are found in Matthew chapter 13. If you want to turn your Bibles there, that's where we'll get started. Look at a couple of thoughts about the parables themselves as we get started. Let me get that back door closed. Hey, will you close the back door there, please? Thank you. Okay. Does anybody know what a parable is? Right. I've heard that forever, haven't you? Yeah, and that's a good definition of a parable. Well, what's the literal definition of the word parable?
Para means beside.
And bola? Bola means to throw. So to throw or put alongside of. It's two things are put beside of each other for the sake of comparison. And that's what a parable is. Sometimes it's a contrast. For example, the parable of the tares. You got good and bad there in that parable. And the dragnet, there's good and bad in that one too. Okay, about 1/3 of Jesus' teachings are made up of parables. And I've read from some people that put the number of parables up in the 40s and 50s and even higher than that. I've heard 70 parables that Jesus taught. But the way we're going to look at them, there are a total of 32, I believe it is, parables that we're going to look at along the way here. And we're going to look at the ones that are found in Matthew chapter 13 first. And the first parable that we look at is going to be 38 parables. So the one we're going to look at first is the parable of the soils. This is probably, besides the parable of the Good Samaritan, this might be one of the most well-known of the parables. I'm going to ask you to read for me this morning, if you don't mind, the parable of the soils found in Matthew 13. Let's look at 1 through 9 first. 1 through 9. Would someone read those for us, please?
On the same day, Jesus went out of the house, and sat by the sea. And great multitudes were gathered together to him, so that he got into a boat and sat, and the whole multitude stood on the shore. Then he spoke many things to them in parables, saying, Behold, a sower went out to sow. And as he sowed, some seed fell by the wayside, and the birds came and devoured them. Some fell on stony places where it did not have much earth, and they immediately sprang up because they had no depth of earth. And when the sun was up, they were scorched, and because they had no root, they withered away. And some fell among thorns, and the thorns sprang up and choked them. But others fell on good ground, and yielded a crop, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. He who has ears to hear, let him hear.
Okay. So here there is a sower, and there is a seed, and there are 4 different grounds that seed falls on. The first one is called the wayside. And the wayside is hard, so the seed cannot take root. And he says the birds come along and eat those seeds. Now, I know there's some of you that have sowed seed. I've sowed seed, but I've never sowed it in the way he's talking about here, where it would just go out, and fall on different types of ground. We always had a specific good place to put the seed because our garden wasn't humongous or anything. But there were still hard places in the garden. And these were the places where we would walk. You wouldn't dare try to put a seed in those places. I can remember our house sat here, and our garden was down here, and there was a fence down here that belonged to the other people over here. They had a garage that sat on the corner of their property, and the road ran right down beside our house, and there was a bridge down here right beside that the creek ran through. And when it was really muddy and wet, myself and the 2 girls that lived next door to me would come along by the side of the garage and come through the fence and walk up by the side of the garden, which was hard, where it wasn't muddy. So we knew, we are understanding that hard ground. So that's the first ground, okay? Now the second is the stony ground. Now the stony ground is not like what we might think about it. Every ground is stony. Some of it's more stony than others. Our garden was stony, and I spent a lot of time throwing rocks out of it. And I would make a game out of it. Have something to throw those rocks at, and that made it a lot easier. But that's not what he's talking about here. He's talking about a ground that would have a stony ledge under it. So there wouldn't be much room for the root. And the seed would go down and it would sprout for a little while. But then when the sun came out and it was really hot and not much rain, it would die. Then there's the third type. And some, he says, fell among thorns or weeds. Let's just call it weeds. Weeds are everywhere. Weeds are powerful. Weeds are much more powerful than seeds that we sow. And so we want to be careful that the ground that we plant things on, we're careful that the weeds don't grow up and choke the seed. That's what happens here. They both grow together. And the thorns or the weeds are more powerful than the plant. So after a while, it dies. Then, of course, there's the fourth ground, and that is the good ground. and it's good, soft, workable land. He doesn't mention anything here about after the seed is sown, what happens. The farmer doesn't just go and sit down on his porch and wait for it to plant, does he? There are things he has to do along the way. I know even in our small garden, we had to pull weeds, we had to plow around it, to keep the weeds from taking over, to make sure that they are going to have much room to grow and things like that. So this is good ground, though. The plant is going to grow in this type of ground, and it'll grow differently. Some of it will grow higher and more fruitful than others, but it all grows together. So that's the one side of this parable. And then he says in verse 10, says, the disciples came and said to him, why do you speak to them in parables? Would someone read verses 11 through 15, please? 11 through 15. Yes, please.
Well, the hearts of the people have grown dull, their ears are hard of hearing, and their eyes they have closed. Lest they see with their eyes, hear with their ears, lest they should understand with their heart, and turn so that I should heal them.
Okay, good. Okay, quotes a parable from Isaiah chapter 6, verses 9 and 10. And this parable is quoted in other places as well. And with this parable, along with what Jesus has said, we can understand the two purposes of the parable. What are the two purposes of the parable? And these purposes are both in contrast to one another. Some people will hear the parable and not understand it. And Jesus made it a parable so that those with a hard heart could not understand it. That's just the way it was formed. Then there were the people who did understand it. That's another purpose. These people are ones who have their hearts opened. They have a soft heart, not a hard heart. So there's the difference between a hard heart and a soft heart. And there's a difference between those who will hear and understand and do, and there's those that will hear and not understand, so therefore they don't obey it. So there's the two purposes. Without reading everything that is said here, I'll let you all read all of that. And he says, but blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. For assuredly I say to you that many prophets and righteous men desired to see what you see and did not see it, and to hear what you hear and did not hear it. So the apostles were very blessed, and the disciples were very blessed to hear these parables, because they taught great lessons about the kingdom. And many of the parables begin by something that says, the kingdom of heaven is like. And then it goes on to talk about it from there. Look at verse 31, for example. And another parable he put forth to them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is like. And this is the mustard seed. And then in verse 33, another parable he spoke to them, the kingdom of heaven is like. And that's the parable of the leaven. And Many of the parables, not most of them, but many of them start that way. In the parable of the sower, I don't think he mentions the kingdom until verse 11, because it has been given to you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given. Okay, then he gives the interpretation of the parable. If someone would read starting at verse 18 down through verse 23. 18 through 23, please.
Hear then the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what has been sown in his heart. This is what was sown along the path. As for what was sown on rocky ground, this is the one who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. Yet he has no root in himself, but endures for a while, and when tribulation or persecution arises on account of the word, immediately he falls away. As for what was sown among thorns, this is the one who hears the word, but the cares of the world and the deceitfulness of riches chokes the word and it proves unfruitful. As for what was sown on good soil, this is the one who hears the word and understands it. He indeed bears fruit and yields, in one case 100-fold, in another 60, and in another 30.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so here are the four different grounds, the four different conditions of human hearts. Now, let's don't think that what he's doing is saying 1/4 of the people who hear the word will be this way, 1/4 will be this way, 1/4 will be this way, and 1/4 will be this way. He's just saying there are four types of ground. Understand? There may not be as much seed that falls on the good ground as the others, you see, but it's still falling there. Okay, let's look at it. What does he say that the wayside or the hard ground represents?
Maybe a hard heart.
Hard heart, right?
Just
Can't penetrate, okay? So he says the word of the God, the word of the kingdom, and does not understand it. So this person would represent those people that he said are not going to understand the parable anyway. So that's the heart here. There are some people who just don't understand the word when it's preached. How come? How come the heart is hard and they can't understand the word when it's preached?
They don't want to.
They don't want to, okay, there's one reason. They don't want to understand it. You know, they don't even give it a shot, do they? They're not try to understand it.
Most people don't study the Bible, so therefore they don't understand it. And they just, to them, it feels better just to not know.
Yeah. So they're reading and understanding, or try to understand, it's just a surface level anyway. So on that surface level, they can't get root down and begin to understand what it says. Now, what do the birds represent in this parable? It says the birds come and take away the seed.
That's what the devil does to us when it comes to fruit.
Okay, it's the devil, isn't it? You know, the devil comes, he says, the wicked one, and snatches away what was sown in his heart. So the devil comes and snatches away the word before the word has any opportunity to soften the heart. So we have to understand that the devil is ready and working when the word of God is sown. So he sees someone, okay, here's a person with a hard heart. Here's a person who's never obeyed the word, you know, and here he has an opportunity. The word is preached. The devil is there. When the word falls on his heart, the devil in his workings, and I don't understand all the way the devil works, but he's saying that the devil does this. So we have to say the devil does this, don't we? So he snatches away the word out of that person's heart before it has an opportunity to sink down in. So I don't know how the devil does that, but I trust that he does. And so we know that some people don't understand, don't want to understand, don't want to continue to understand. And whenever the word is preached, the devil comes along and snatches it out of the heart so there's no opportunity to grow.
That might be in kind of a way that, say, somebody's studying the Bible, and their mom and dad says, studying, but they say,
That's a good point. Right, good point.
I believe what he's saying to these people, they already knew a whole lot of what he was saying. But Jesus now has to make an application. Because they already knew about ground, seed,
Right,
all that.
right, yeah.
He wouldn't give them a lesson in
No,
gardening.
he uses something that they understand, a common ground, to start the lesson. What Bill was talking about, someone is hearing the word and they have somebody who just doesn't want them to hear it, so they take them away. I can remember my friend and I had an opportunity, Ed Covert, to go and do a Bible study with this lady that I worked with and I had talked with, and she was understanding and agreed to the Bible study, so we figured we're going to have a good Bible study. So we went to her apartment, and her roommate was there, and she immediately, before we had any opportunity to teach my friend, began to contradict everything that the Church of Christ knows and believes and teaches. So that my friend had to get in another room with her and talk to her, try to talk to her about the truth. And she was so loud, and her rebellion, was so open that I could not properly teach the young lady that was sitting beside me. And I could even tell with what little I taught that she had already been affected from the teaching of her roommate. So from the time that she agreed to teach, for us to come in for a Bible lesson, her roommate had corrupted her heart to the point where the word would not start getting down in there. I think if we'd had another opportunity, we might have been able to do something, but she refused studies from then on out. So I don't know really what happened to her.
You know how to determine whether someone is teachable?
How?
Do they have a humble heart?
Yeah,
Because that's the humility, that's why it focuses so much on humility. But if someone is not willing to admit they were wrong, they're not going to listen.
right.
My daddy, my granddaddy, and all this, has been doing this way all their life. I'm not going to change. You're not going to talk to them, but I'm not going to change.
Yeah,
That's why it says, humble yourself in the sight of God. Because if you don't admit, I may have been wrong. And they have to be willing to come to that point before they'll ever open their ears and listen.
that's right. No doubt about it. Because the word can't be planted in a hard heart. There has to be a humble heart. Okay, so there's the wayward ground, or the hard ground, the hard heart. How about the seed is planted, and the person hears the word, receives the word with joy, but has no root in himself. For when tribulation or persecution arises, he immediately stumbles. He only is faithful for a little while. I know that we have heard, I think this might be the most occurring type of ground right here. People hears the word, You know, they actively receive it. They're really happy when they receive it, when they obey the gospel. But they don't really have any root deep enough, or a heart that's deep enough for the word to grow properly. So for a while, you know, they're faithful. But what comes along after a while? What does he say comes along? They hear the word, they receive it with joy, but they have no root in himself. They endure for a while, but what comes? Eventually this will come in one way or another in a person's life. Right, tribulation or persecution arises because of the word. Now, it's tribulation or persecution arises because of the word. The tribulation is not necessarily because of the word, but the persecution is. We're all going to have tribulation. So the person has some tribulation that comes into his life. How many of us have known people that when something really hard comes into their life, they fall away? They can't handle it. They don't have a root of the word deep enough that they can endure that tribulation that comes their way. I know that we have people in here that have had tribulation. I've had tribulation myself. Ruth Ann's had tribulation. You know, most of ours has been health problems. Some people have gone through a lot of poverty, for example, or abuse, or something like that. You know, and when that comes into their life, they fall away. It happens. And we should not be surprised when it happens. That doesn't say that we don't make an effort to keep them, does it? We make an effort to keep them from falling away, but they're going to fall away. Okay, that's the second ground. Anybody got a comment about that? Okay. Right, yeah. It will. Yeah, it will. And they may receive more tribulation because they're a Christian, but for certain, they're going to have more persecution because somebody outside of Christ are not persecuted. You know, the devil would just try to keep a hold on them, but they're not persecuted because they are Christians, because they're not Christians yet. Okay, let's say here's the third type of heart. This is a seed is sowed among the thorns. Now, is there ever in this parable anything wrong with the seed? Could it be that the seed is bad and the seed doesn't do its job? Well, that's right. The seed's the word of God. God forbid that his seed is ever going to be bad. It's always good. What about the sower? Is the sower not doing his job? Not here, he's not. You know, the sower can not do his job. But here he is doing his job. And there's still people who are falling away. What's the problem with the, excuse me, man. What's the problem with the third heart?
The cares and deceitfulness of riches choke out the word.
Right.
The weeds.
Okay, just like the weeds choke the plant. Okay, here we got the plant's growing. Instead of tribulation and persecution, it could be that they come, but they withstand that. But what happens is that it is the cares of the world. What is the cares of the world?
In that verse it says, towards the end, deceitfulness of riches. And people have a lot of money, they give them that money.
Right. Yeah, they think that riches are going to do the job, but they won't, do they? They fail. They fail 100% of the time when it comes to spiritual growth. Now, the cares of the world and the deceitfulness of riches. The cares of the world would be what? The worries, the concerns of the world. They're more concerned about worldly things than they are about the truth.
Could be an innocent hobby.
A hobby could be something that comes so much a part of that person that it constantly grows on them, we might say. Okay. It says he becomes unfruitful. For a while he is fruitful, but then he or she, becomes unfruitful. Okay, so here the parable, the disciples are hearing this parable, and they look at the first three grounds. If you were looking at those first three grounds, what would your thought be? What's the use of sowing the seed? Because we're not having any fruitfulness here. We're not having anybody who comes to maturity in their life as a Christian, that bears fruit, that goes out and does good, that does whatever they do, lead singing, whatever it is in the church that they do. So there's three different hearts that the Word doesn't have any fruitfulness. Okay, but there's one left.
We did, any further on that one of the things is we need to realize when we're talking to people and they do become a Christian, we need to be prepared for them to all of a sudden have to do a lot of overtime, a lot of things will come up because Satan will put things in their path to hinder them, or slow them down, and create issues where they don't become fruitful.
Right.
And we, as a supportive church, need to understand that and be available to help them recognize that's temporary.
Mhm.
And that's something that you gotta think about.
Right. So we got to try to do something about these first three grounds, but what Jesus says about it is that they become unfruitful. That can be very discouraging. To me, knocking on doors was always discouraging. I guess you could say when you knock on someone's door and you set up a Bible study, that can be encouraging. But when I've looked at the total of knocking on doors, that has been discouraging to me. When I've looked at times when I've been able to study with somebody I know or somebody in the church knows, then that has been very encouraging when I've done that. Of course, when we're able to baptize children that are growing up, that's encouraging. We might say, well, that's just a child of the member. That's what we expect. Well, just look at the total of it. It would be a good thing, and I don't know right now. I haven't heard of a study that's come up to any conclusion here about what percent of Christian children of Christian parents grow up to be faithful Christians. Have a lot that have, yeah, we do. Do we have any that we have? There are a couple probably we could think of that in the time I've been here anyway, that haven't been faithful. But most of them have, and that's good. And hopefully the rest of the children here will continue to grow in the Lord and become faithful Christians.
I think we as sowers, like if we're the sower, there's not much you can do with the stony ground and beside the wayside unless you wanted to completely cultivate that. But with the thorny ground, I think about when I was baptized as a teen, parents weren't Christians, but they were God-fearing people.
Yeah.
But when I went away to school, if the church there in that town had not cared for me and continued to teach me, but they taught me more by including me in their families. I think, I could have easily
Yeah.
down the cares and,
Right.
to pull me away.
They kept you away from things like that, didn't they? They guarded you away
And
from
they
things like
became a family to me.
Right. Yeah.
And still are to this day.
Mhm. Yeah. And their names are Chapman.
But not.
Not related, though. Bonnie?
So, we're talking about selling the city. If you don't believe God started this congregation to go out into the world, to find us also, what do you do to bring them? You say you don't like doing it. Well, I've done that for 20-some years here. We've done that a lot. And there has been progress with that. Okay? So, what do you do to go out there and bring those people here? And we build, and we have built, and we have a gate around this church. We have a gate around it. We will not let anything come in. I don't care what it is. And I'm sorry, I have issues with that. And that's the one thing about being a Church of Christ member. I grew up that way. I've learned that. And that's the one thing that Church of Christ people don't do. They will not go outside of their church to bring people in. They will not. So you talk about going even in your own neighborhood. You know, me and Steve live in a neighborhood, we know the people, but we don't socialize with them.
Yeah.
I think we have a fear that if we socialize with a sinner, and I mean, I don't mean party, going to bars and things like that, but if we don't socialize with them,
Yeah.
how do you communicate with them? And we have a fear that we think if we socialize with them, and I had that fear too. I had that feeling growing up. I never had friends that were not a church member because I had the fear that I would be straight, full straight. That weeds would overtake me, the sin would overtake me, and I would find myself outside of the church. It's so easy to be done, but then that's my frustration. What do you do to bring people here?
Yeah.
We're responsible. No one preached for 120 years. He never gave up. He still did it till God brought the rains. He kept on. Did he have anybody else other than his family? He said no. But he still continued to do what God wanted him to do.
Yeah. Good point, Connie.
When we were at All Road, before we became Wooddale, we used to do a lot of door knocking. And it became self-evident, the more doors we knocked on, the worse we were treated. It's kind of like, there's another group that knocks doors a lot, and we know about them. They have a bad reputation. If we don't build our reputation on something good, all the door knocking in the world, all the talking to people in the world, they're not going to do any good. They're going to do the same thing to us that has been done to this other group. I can remember my grandfather and my grandmother living in a room where we lived, one room. And my grandmother said one time, if she had a choice as to what she was going to be, it would be a member of the Church of Christ, because they taught the truth. But her husband, my grandfather, wonderful man, loved him to death. He refused to listen to her. And so I think sometimes we give up too soon. And it's not a matter of when we walk around with a frown on our head and say, oh, how good I am, look at me, and try to teach them. Because they are looking at you. And if you're not following what God says to do, give it up.
Yeah.
If you're ugly, give it up. Because you're not going to do anything.
Yeah.
I have never been to a non-profit. I respect it. I've been to a lots of buildings. And it's the attitude that you approach these people. And it's not with holiness.
have never had the door slammed in my face either. Never have.
Neither have I, but they don't want you to come back.
Yeah, they don't want you to.
I've seen tracks in the churches of Christ with trash cans outside of homes that we've run.
Right.
But because something maybe didn't work the first time, doesn't mean it needs to stop.
Yeah.
You gotta find some other way. How can you better what you're doing?
Mm-hmm.
You gotta keep trying and trying. As this lesson tells us, we're responsible to sow the seed, and God will do the harvest.
That's right. We need to understand that, like Paul said in 1 Corinthians 3. Yeah. I do too.
It's not a matter of sowing the word, how you do it. If you go with an attitude, I'm right, you're wrong, forget it.
Yeah.
And that's what happens a lot of times with members of the church of Christ. They always want to come out on top. They never want to have to give up. They always want to be on top. And they'll end up saying, there's people one that say, I don't want that. Because of attitude. And so we better get our attitude straight and get it right before we ever try to not go it. Or people are just flat not going to listen to you.
Okay, let me say this is to end the statement, the class this morning. I think probably all of us know what to do. And like Bonnie said, we don't do it. And I think she has really included every single one of this in this. Herself included, myself, her husband, my wife, my daughter. You know, but there are some people here today because of what we have done. Tracy is here today because of what Aaron has done. You know, and Damien, if those are the only ones that ever come to church because of her efforts, that makes it worthwhile. Ruth Ann and I have had people come. We haven't around here. We haven't been able, our next door neighbor's been here a few times. And we've worked on him pretty hard. And hopefully we'll be able to someday get him to study with us to convert him. But thank you all for your comments today.